Alright, time to talk about some Moonlight. Oh, I forgot to turn my little light on. Let me go ahead and do that real quick. Hey! Do it again.
Let me taste you.
Moonlight episode 3 has landed now on Disney Plus, and what I'm gonna do here for you guys is giving you my spoiler review, pointing out some Easter eggs you might have missed, little details here and there, theorizing, but overall, just my reaction to Moonlight episode 3. Things are definitely starting to move forward. I like the synergy they're creating with the Mr. Knight and Mark Spector Moonlight persona, but either way, let me know your guys' opinions on Moonlight episode 3, your theories, your thoughts. Alright, so with the opening of episode 3 for Moonlight, we find the character of Layla going ahead and making herself a fake passport. Now, since in previous episodes we went ahead and found out that Layla and the Mark Spector side of Moon Knight did a bunch of adventures, we can assume this is the same person that was making a bunch of the fake passports for Mark Spector. But during this conversation, we also get some interesting little tidbits about Layla where they mention her father and how she would call her his scarab. I think this is the show letting us know that Layla's father was also involved in researching Egyptian ruins and possibly even digging for stuff, and knowing the backstory of Mark Spector that he got his powers at an Egyptian site, wouldn't be surprised if it's revealed they crossed paths. From there, after the Marvel title card sequence, we are taken now to Egypt where we see Harrow and his followers using the scarab to locate Amit's tomb. This is all in hopes to resurrect Amit and fulfill his prophecy of making sure they can cleanse the world of evil, locating exactly where Amit's tomb is and beginning to dig. This is where we cut to Mark Spector following and chasing down some people that seem to be followers of Harrow. That should be noted for the people wondering why exactly he wouldn't change into its Moon Knight outfit. If they're following some things from the comics, it seems that he can only turn into Moon Knight at night. Thankfully, we know Mark Spector is a mercenary and a background in the military makes it so that he can take down these goons, and paying close attention that he doesn't want to exactly kill anybody at first. It seems that Mark does try to restrain himself, but sometimes anger does get the best of him, as we've seen before in previous episodes when he smashed that mirror. In moments like that, Steven comes out trying to stop him because Steven does not like murder. Here's where we get something that I think the show has been hinting at us all along here, possibly the third personality that we have yet to see in Moon Knight, Jake Lockley. Throughout the show, we see things from Mark's perspective, and when he blacks out, some of us can assume that maybe it's Steven Grant taking over his body, but even Steven will sometimes mention that he's not in control, and right here, waking up in a taxi cab when Jake Lockley in the comics, that persona, was a taxi driver, it feels like that's what Marvel is hinting at towards fans. Now then again, it could just be Steven who wants to get out of there now that he has control of the body, and that's why he's in the taxi cab wanting to go to the airport to head back to his house. But with Mark Spector in control now, he quickly sees again those goons he was going after that have now been set free and are confused why Mark is chasing them again when he literally just let them go. Getting a little bit more aggressive, we again cut to another blackout where, have not seen this on a Disney Plus show yet, whoever was in control of the body straight up killed all of these dudes as the knife was just sliding out of this person. One thing I'm noticing is it looks like Jake Lockley takes control whenever Mark is just full of rage. I don't know if that could be the triggering thing that lets him take over, but that seems to be the pattern we are getting so far. Either way, it's interesting to note that Mark Spector and both Steven Grant are stunned with the display of violence in front of them, which is something they don't typically want to do. It seems like Mark will go the length to kill somebody, but if it's an extreme measure, while this just seems kind of cruel. Pointing to what we've been talking about is we think the Jake Lockley persona in the MCU might be the more evil persona. We think he's the one that was flirting with co-workers, asking them out on dates, to steakhouse, possibly knowing that one of his personas is a vegan, and now straight up taking down these people. I think whenever the reveal happens and they find out another person is living within them capable of this stuff, it's going to create some great tension for season 2. But with the followers of Harrow and Amit not wanting to reveal anything about their plans or their gravesite, instead they'd rather die, Mark speaks to Khonshu and says, well, would the other gods be okay with one just being resurrected? They must object to that. Can they help us here? And that's where Khonshu says it is possible, but we also face the risk of angering them and them punishing us. Here though, we find Mark entering the pyramid of Giza where he's going to go ahead and and meet the council of the Egyptian gods that once had a lot of power and say over Earth. A couple of things to note here: it seems that a lot of these gods use avatars, like Mark is the avatar for Khonshu, to go ahead and represent themselves on the council. Even more so when you realize each one of these avatars have their own powers, similar to like Moon Knight, but they come up with the age-old excuse, same as the Eternals, they prefer not to interfere with humankind and let them be because they stopped worshipping them long ago. Man, if we had a nickel for every time there was powerful people that decided not to do anything during the snap, we'd have a lot of nickels. It becomes very clear though during these sequences that Khonshu is not looked upon as the most favorable god and is in a lot of bad faith with them. Even more so whenever they try to bring up Harrow is doing something wrong and evil by summoning Amit, Harrow steps in and uses Mark's disorder against them, saying that this person is unwell and Khonshu is just taking advantage of a human on Earth, letting Harrow go free, and Khonshu being warned that if they mess with them again, he could be imprisoned. Luckily, one of the avatars of the gods does feel bad for Mark and wants to give him advice on how to possibly find Amit, being tasked with looking for a map that will tell him exactly where it's buried. Here's then where we get again Mark just kind of roaming around the Egypt city, where we see him wearing a hat with a Chicago logo on it, but more meant to resemble the moon crest, and possibly even more hints to Jake Lockley, as he was someone that also wore hats in the comics. At this time though, Layla finally appears by his side, saying that he wants to help Mark in his mission. It's this conversation between them that reveals a lot of interesting stuff. It's something that we've kind of always known, that Mark has known about Steven having been existed and setting up this other life for him, that it could be separated from his own marriage and adventures as Moon Knight. But it seems pretty clear that neither of them know about the Jake Lockley persona, and that makes me curious to know, does Jake Lockley know about Steven and Mark? And if he does, shouldn't that also mean that Khonshu is aware of the Jake Lockley persona? And why has he not mentioned it to Mark when it seems like Mark is his go-to for getting stuff done? Eventually arriving to the location they needed, Layla meets up here with one of her contacts, Anton Mogart. Now, a couple of things about this character. One, sadly the actor portraying Anton Mogart passed away shortly after filming the show Moonlight during a skiing accident, which is why you get an in memory of at the end of this episode to that actor. That's really sad to hear about that actor, especially when he's playing a good, well-known Moon Knight villain called Midnight. Now, Midnight in the comics usually has kind of like this all-black attire and was someone who was frequent for stealing art and gallery paintings that were very expensive. In fact, one of the reasons he was called Midnight is because he always struck at midnight. That's when he did most of his crimes. There's no rumor or word yet if the actor will actually suit up somewhere in the series as Midnight. He does kind of leave an ambiguous end at the end of this episode, whether he died by the hands of Moon Knight or he was just badly injured. I'm gonna imagine they're just never gonna bring that character back up with the passing of the actor. But with Mark here kind of inspecting this tombstone and looking for the map that can give them an idea where Amit is, here's where we start to see some of the smooth transitions between Mark and Steven Grant that I love to see. This is the kind of stuff why I'm happy they changed it from the comics. This creates a really nice complex setting where you have Mark, who is the muscle, but he has no idea about this archaeology or astrology stuff, things that Steven does know about and can be very helpful. It just sucks having to give control over to that person and be stuck in the body, especially when things start to go down with Harrow showing up and the men of Mogart attacking both Layla and Mark. This is where we get some really great sequences here of Moon Knight doing classic stuff from the comics. Like one, his cape is just pulled right out of sequences from the comics, even as far as him just throwing random gadgets. It was a really cool sequence to go down, and I know, again, some people are complaining every time Mr. Knight shows up, but I feel like it's almost a good little balance here, because at the moment that Mr. Knight shows up is right when Mark was about to kill another individual, and that's something Steven just doesn't want to happen. That's where we see him pop up, try to go ahead and reconcile with the goons, see if he can talk them out, until he just ends up getting stabbed. The comedy for Mr. Knight isn't working for everybody, but I don't know, it makes me smile. The transition back and forth just really makes me excited for what other cool things they could do in the future with these characters. I'm really really hoping they eventually teach Mr. Knight how to fend for himself a little bit, because if not, it just feels kind of ridiculous for him to have these superpowers if he's never really going to use them. Once Mark and Steven finally get themselves out of that situation, they go and head off to a location without any other people, trying to piece back together this map so they can find Amit. This is a situation that would be very useful that Steven Grant comes in, but Mark is just not wanting to hand over the body until he finally realizes that he just has to. And this is again where I just want to praise Oscar Isaac's performance, because his transition from each character without us having to see the suit change just looks so good. This is exactly why they hired someone like Oscar Isaac, because the man is just so talented. Eventually figuring out that the map is a constellation map where the stars are going to be the things that tell you where Amit is buried. Unfortunately, since the stars do move every couple thousands of years, it's hard to pinpoint exactly where Amit is located. This is then where we get a beautiful scene with Khonshu going ahead and setting back the stars all the way to what they looked like that night, that I'm sure the entire world was freaking out wondering what the heck is going on. Sadly though, the gods would consider this as more meddling and would punish Khonshu for messing with mankind without his permission and imprisoning him. Now this is kind of interesting to me, because even in the comics there are times where Khonshu is sort of locked away or taken to another spot where he's not bothering Moon Knight, and Mark was just left to do his own thing, still having the Moon Knight powers. Here in the MCU they're making it so if Khonshu is not there by his side or he's trapped away somewhere else, he's not able to use his abilities. I was really thinking that by the end of the season something would happen to Khonshu where he's locked away, put away, and then Mark can just keep the Moon Knight powers as long as he wants, not having to risk them eventually going to Layla or anyone else. But there's no way the MCU or the show would continue with a powerless Moon Knight, meaning Mark and Layla are most likely going to try and find a way to free Khonshu so that he can get his powers back. But that is everything that was going on in episode 3 of Moon Knight. I'm still really digging the series. Next week's episode is going to get a little kooky, so be prepared for that. But also, I'm like, there's a lot of stuff they're setting up here and only 3 episodes left. They need to pick up the pace, man. That seems to be the main problem with these Marvel shows. Can they stick the ending and the landing? Hopefully, because this show's been pretty good so far. Let me know your guys' opinions. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3CFilms or on TikTok at 3CFilms. But as always, I'm Chris. Take care.